Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to The Black Tower Show. I'm your host, Nathan Ford. We're in BC Studios, broadcasting 1310 WRSB, 1590 WASB, Brockport, Canandaigua, Rochester, Buffalo, a wide expanse of upstate New York, and it's cold. And it's snowing outside. The first snow is out there. People are a little hunched over. They're a little disappointed, but they haven't given up yet. And we got work to do here in BC Studios, the Black Tower Show, bringing you guests that are doing things for you, that are doing the work for you, that are making sacrifices for you. Thomas Drake on the Black Tower Show, former senior executive of the U.S. National Security Agency. I've heard of that, Jake. NSA whistleblower. United States Air Force and United States Navy veteran. In 2010, the government alleged that Drake mishandled documents, was charged under the Espionage Act. 2010, charged for these crimes. This is a law. Espionage Act dates back to 1917. Obama administration now has used it 8 times.
A record 8 times. Yep.
He gets the record. That's great. That's not a record that you want to have. Thomas Drake, you're a hero. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us on the Black Tower Show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Your time at the NSA. What was the tipping point for you? When was enough for you? And when did you have to go to the Baltimore Sun? When did you have to blow the whistle on this thing?
Well, the tipping point for me is what I call my moment of truth. Is actually the first week in October of 2001, when after having found out in the previous couple of weeks that the United States, in the deepest secrecy, had unchained itself from the Constitution and had tossed aside the Fourth Amendment, and at the time the exclusive means by which NSA could conduct electronic surveillance against a U.S. person, which was the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. I confronted the lead attorney at NSA and was told in no uncertain terms that it was all legal. The White House has approved it, and the NSA was the executive agent for the program, which was the secret surveillance program known as Stellar Wind. And I knew in that moment that if I remained silent, I'd be complicit to the subversion of the Constitution. I'd be an accessory to a crime, and I had taken an oath to support and defend the Constitution, an idea on how to govern ourselves. And for all of its faults and contradictions, I was not going to break that oath. And it was the one thing that made us different. It was the one thing that set us apart. It was the grand experiment. And although there were no guarantees, I knew that this was Pandora's box opened up. And I knew that the strategic decisions that had been made willfully and deliberately at the highest levels of the government, ostensibly because of 9/11, or using 9/11 as the excuse, and recognizing that it was a systemic failure of massive proportions, and the NSA itself was quite culpable in 9/11, I knew it had enormous downstream consequences. And so I decided to blow the whistle, and I blew the whistle to any number of people within NSA, Congress, and others. Turns out it was all without any effect. It was as if the entire history of the thousands of pages of material witness evidence that I had provided to, for example, 2 9/11 congressional investigations in 2002, it was as if that history had never existed, completely expunged from the pages. And
we're talking to Thomas Drake on the Black Tower Show, and it's important to note all charges dropped against you. Even the judge comes out and says, this is ridiculous, because they tried to get some money from you, didn't they? They tried to, put this hefty fine on you. And I want you to talk about how this has changed your life, okay? I don't want to assume that people know your story. You can go and you can look up Thomas Drake, okay? But Tell how this has changed your life. They went after you. They wanted to fine you.
Well,
all the charges dropped.
Yeah, but that took a lot to get to that point. I was placed under investigation sometime in 2006. And for the next 4 years, I endured extraordinary physical and electronic surveillance and had my house raided and tossed in 2007. And then another 2.5 years went by, and the government finally decided to indict me under the Espionage Act, of all things. It's the worst thing that you can charge an American with. I mean, espionage, I was placed in the same category as Alger Hiss and Robert Hansen and Aldrich Ames.
It was intended for spies.
It's intended for spies, not whistleblowers, and it's a World War I era statute. And I was only the second whistleblower. Daniel Ellsberg of Pentagon Papers fame was the first to be charged in like manner. In fact, using the exact same statute. By the way, the statute itself had been modified in 1950 as part of the National Security Act of 1950 to specifically deal, first modification since 1917 in terms of the Espionage Act statute itself, to deal with Alger Hiss and the so-called Pumpkins paper caper. In fact, Senator Pat McCarran actually takes personal credit for it. If you go back in the congressional record and look at the extraordinary, his own committee, that's McCarran, the McCarran International, Las Vegas, who some would say out McCarthy, he was personally responsible for including that modification to specifically deal with Alger Hiss. I mean, it's an extraordinary charge. I mean, I've said this publicly and privately in any number of fora. I've said that I was the Benedict Arnold. I had become a Benedict Arnold. Benedict Arnold in U.S. American Revolutionary history, was a decorated general. He was one of the trusted generals under Washington, the commander of the Continental Army, and he chose to take off, his uniform, and what you found out is he was wearing the coat of the British. He was a red coat, and that's how I was painted. And it was clear here was the Obama administration who had come into office on part of a platform of it was going to be the most open and transparent administration of all time, and had lauded the role of whistleblowers, and had called them patriotic, and how crucial they were to democracy. And here I was, charged with espionage, and it was so rare for an American to be charged with espionage for non-spy activities that no one came to my aid except for one organization, the Government Accountability Project. I had a private attorney. I had, for the previous 2 years, at one point I was threatened with spending the rest of my life in prison by the chief prosecutor at the time in April 2008 if I didn't cooperate with the investigation. Everybody thought, including my private attorney, that when Obama came into office that all this would disappear. It clearly didn't. And although the Bush administration had a secret draft indictment, it ultimately was never served on me. That took the Obama administration with a new chief prosecutor. And
this transparency that Obama's talking about.
You're
talking about the transparency.
Well, he decided to look backwards and not forwards. I mean, total hypocrisy.
And this is the one safety valve that our country has. This is the safety valve. You are a hero. Because you represent that. Listen, this is something that needs to be there. It's essential for the survival of our society here.
Well, I've said that. Whistleblowers are the canaries in the constitutional coal mine. We are the alert system. We are the ones that bring to public attention things that are clearly in the public interest, and that was precisely what happened to me. I did eventually go to a reporter after 4+ years of blowing the whistle within the system. And I went to a reporter with what I knew that was unclassified about the secret surveillance program and massive fraud, waste, and abuse, and extraordinary loss of intelligence and NSA culpability and mismanagement and malfeasance being practiced by NSA leadership. But the main reason it's really important for your audience to know, they came after me. If you read the warrant that was served on me, the affidavit behind the warrant that went before a magistrate judge who approved the warrant, the search warrant against me at my home, my house, and my office, because at the time I was teaching at the National Defense University as a visiting professor of behavioral science on strategic leadership, information strategies, and leadership ethics. If you actually read the warrant itself and that affidavit, it's clear that they thought I was a ringleader of a conspiracy against the United States of America and was the source, the key source, facilitating information to the New York Times reporters, Eric Lichtblau and James Risen. I had nothing at all to do with the blockbuster article that was published in December 2005, revealing publicly for the first time the existence of the so-called warrantless wiretapping program. And yet they saw fit to come after me. That because they launched DOJ, the Department of Justice had launched a massive national security leak, quote-unquote, leak investigation in late 2005. That's the investigation in which I got caught up by virtue of association. The number of people that knew about the secret surveillance program was called Stellar Wind, the very foundational programs which Edward Snowden started disclosing a great deal to reporters and journalists in June of this year. The very foundation of those programs started back right after 9/11. So here I was on, after a multi-year investigation, here I am charged with espionage, facing 35 years in prison. 35 years in prison, yes. They charged me, I had 5 counts of espionage, 1 for obstruction of justice, and 4 for making false statements, although those statements in themselves were false. So I was behind several 8 balls, and the government clearly at that time, and this is barely a year after Obama is in office, was sending the most chilling of messages. Not only did they want to make a prime example of me, basically drive that stake crowbar, as I've said more recently, that crowbar stake of national security right through me and prod me out in the public comment and say, hey, this is what you do, this is what happens to anybody who dares hold up a mirror.
Sure.
Speak
it's
truth
like,
to
it is
our
a
power.
tactic that they use, and they've used it to bash Bradley Manning. They've thrown it at Snowden, and it's about demonizing your character and not actually addressing the real issue, that there's injustice and immoral things happening. Let's not look at that. Let's go right after the character. Yeah. This is some schoolyard psychotic business that's going on here.
Well, I've called it pathological, but this, the government has extraordinary power, and the Department of Justice has a whole lot of arrows in its quiver, and it was full court press. I mean, they were doing everything they could to destroy me, and my life, I'll say it, was completely turned inside out and upside down. I was a senior executive at NSA. They criminalized my whistleblowing, my First Amendment rights. They criminalized that. So by holding up the mirror, they said, you know what? Yeah, we don't like you doing that. We're going to make it a prime example of you, and so they did. And it's important to note that when it was so unusual to indict an American with espionage, it's so unusual.
Yeah.
Ellsberg having been the first, it's so unusual that those you would have thought would have come to my aid, those you would have thought would have supported me, those you would have thought would have publicly announced their support and advocacy didn't. The only person at that time who actually realized the gravity of what had occurred was Jesselyn Radak, the director of National Security and Human Rights of the Government Accountability Project. She wrote this extraordinary op-ed in the L.A. Times shortly after I was indicted, and I realized she got it. See, I knew when I was indicted. I was secretly charged 3 weeks earlier than I was publicly indicted. The government had pronounced me essentially null and void, enemy of the state. I was a traitor. I had caused exceptionally grave damage to the security of the national security of the United States. You had the Department of Justice at the most senior levels with press releases. You had senior FBI officials weighing in on how bad I was, and you had even people in Congress looking forward to seeing me in an orange jumpsuit. And so she wrote this op-ed, and I knew she got what was at stake. She got that this was to snuff out those who would dare speak truth to enough power. And she also got it was also sending the chilling of messages. And here it is, the United States, that we're on to you, you journalists and reporters. We know who your sources are, and we're going to.
That is good to know that there's still people out there that understand that liberty and human sovereignty is something that should be upheld. That's a right that maybe people should have, and that's good that still exists. But I want to. Sure. Can you tell us a little bit specifically about when I talk to people about how the information is gathered? Data gathering. Okay, well, what does that mean? The cell phones, they got the cell phone number. What does it look like? What is happening? How is this injustice, being worked out? What does it look like? How is this information gathered? Can you tell us? Can you give us some insight into this process?
Yeah, that's what I became eyewitness to after 9/11. I mean, I found out shortly after 9/11, people coming to me in private saying, "What are we doing, Tom?" The prime directive of NSA for 23 years because of severe abuses in the 60s and 70s, culminating during the Nixon administration, the Church Committee hearings of 1975, who had warned the nation about the advances in technology, particularly referring to NSA's technology. What would happen? We'd have a turnkey tyranny. And I realized right after 9/11, and people coming to me.
By the way, that speech is really great. By the way, the speech that you gave, I think, was that in October that you gave I read that speech that you gave to the EU. Can you explain what was that speech that you gave?
Well, I mean, this is one of the extraordinary things that's developed. I mean, the European Parliament, because of all the Snowden revelations,
oh sure, yeah,
announced, and this is the Committee on Civil Liberties. They announced a whole series of hearings starting in the fall and continuing to the end of the year. And myself, Justin Radak, EPIC, as well as ACLU and others. In fact, James Sensenbrenner just got back from Brussels. That was at the end of September. We came before that committee and gave testimony regarding what all this surveillance meant, and not just the United States, but also the extraordinary gathering, mass bulk copy gathering of data of even citizens, in this case in Europe. And in fact, during the hearings, the chair of the committee, after I had given my formal testimony and remarks, there was a Q&A period, said this isn't just a war on whistleblowers, this is a war on democracy. That's precisely what it is. Remember, I took an oath 4 times in my government career to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I never imagined that my own government would become a clear and present danger to the continuance of the Constitution. See, that's what happened after 9/11. The government unhinged itself. It literally unchained itself from the constraints of the Constitution, gave itself license to en masse access extraordinary amounts of information, phone records, emails, internet usage, financial transactions. And I knew that this is an anathema form of government and an alien form of government, and I wasn't going to sit idly by and watch it happen.
People don't understand, the kind of severity of the situation, because they say, well, they have this huge database of phone numbers. Well, they can have my phone number. I don't care if they're linking up some phone numbers and these sort of things, and they don't understand the bigger picture at large. And I'm finding it very difficult to push this issue to my friends and my family and saying, well, this is important.
Important is an understatement.
Important. It's imperative. This is something that we need to. The amount of information that is being gathered is astronomical. I
But no, it's staggering. I mean, it makes the East German, in which here it's very personal for me, given what I used to do. I used to fly in RC-135s as a German-Russian cryptolinguist, and the target in which I became an expert, the target country, in which I got to know very, very well.
Yeah.
Between two headphones was East Germany, a fascist surveillance state. I never imagined that the Stasi, whose motto was literally, quote, to know everything, I didn't realize that would be the template for a playbook that would be implemented on a truly vast scale. I mean, it's frightening. It's it's a combination of Orwell, and Huxley, and Kafka. I mean, I just never imagined that this would visit my own country. An alien form of government. I had to resist it. I had to defend the Constitution. Remember, the Constitution itself, for all of its faults and contradictions, is the thing that was supposed to make us different. It was the grand experiment. But even the founding fathers, for all their faults and contradictions, right, knew that there was no guarantee. They knew. And the great fear, because of the American Revolution, that they had just experienced and the utter failure of the Articles of Confederation, they knew that the executive branch had to be constrained, and that's what the Constitution enumerated what that was. It gave them broad authorities in a number of areas, but they were enumerated. And you had three branches. Well, after 9/11, the executive branch said, hey, we're ignoring the Constitution. It doesn't matter. This is secret government we're talking about. This is not our Constitution. You don't have a secret government. They cannot coexist. And so it becomes a direct threat to our form of government, and that's precisely what happened. But again, it's important for your audience to know, this was the excuse was 9/11, and I confronted them directly, and I said, look, if you're saying that the existing law, the legal regime, which NSA was bound, not just obligated, it was bound with criminal sanctions. The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act had criminal sanctions, $10,000 fine, 5 years in prison for every instance of violation. It was the Fourth Amendment Bible for NSA. You did not spy on Americans without a warrant. They just completely dismissed that. They just set it aside, so we don't need it. And I said, okay, wait. You're saying it doesn't work. There's a legal means. There's a constitutional means in this country in which you can change law, modify law, pass new law. You go to Congress, and I was told that first week in October, if we go to Congress with what we want to do, they'll say no.
But the debate is out there now.
Well,
there
yeah,
is that pushback now.
Yeah, well, because Snowden stands on my shoulders and others, and other NSA
visited
whistleblowers.
Snowden. You went to Moscow. I just need to say, you, Ray McGovern, we've had him on the show a bunch of times. Jesselyn Raddick, you just mentioned. Colleen Raleigh.
Yeah.
Sam Adams Award for Integrity and Intelligence, Snowden. And you paved the way. On the shoulders, Snowden stands. Drake, you were there. You saw what was happening. You needed to do something, and now Snowden blows the whole thing wide open. And now, it's the way that this thing has exploded is unbelievable.
He studied. We spent many hours with him. That's a little over a month ago. We spent many hours with him in Russia. Of course, the ironies of history were not lost on me as I was walking across Red Square. I'd never been to Russia, let alone Moscow. I was denied territory back during the Cold War. The Sam Adams Associates goes to wherever the recipient of the award for that year lives, no matter what their circumstances. These were extraordinary. Who would have thunk that he ends up in Russia? But he didn't end up in Russia because he wanted to be there. He ended up in Russia because the United States saw fit to revoke his passport as he was headed to Moscow to transit to Latin America. It's a fact. He had tickets to go on to Latin America. So he became stateless. How he ended up in the transit zone all those many days. Applied for asylum to any number of countries, and the country that offered him asylum, ironically enough, was Russia. And he accepted it, temporary asylum for a year. So he's an asylee under international law, and the paradox, of course, is that right now it's probably the safest place in the world for him. Because there's not very few places you could go to the United States and remain away from the long arm of United States justice. He read my case. He studied it carefully. He saw what had been happening under Obama. He now had access to extraordinary documents revealing the complete extent, how far the surveillance state had gone, both domestically and overseas. And he knew that his only hope of getting this out in the public interest was to escape the United States and get it in the hands of those reporters and journalists he had chosen to give it to. And so, he did. And it is still unfolding. There is still a lot more to come. And we're now finally having the debate. And this debate, and it's extraordinary. I've been having any number of, and myself and Jesselyn and Ray, Colleen, and any number of others are being asked to appear on any number of media outlets, not just the United States, but increasingly overseas, and particularly in Europe of late. They're wondering what the heck's happened to the United States, and why are you en masse spying and gaining access to extraordinary amounts of information on our citizens, and oftentimes, tragically enough, in cooperation with their own nation's security services. You cannot have this kind of surveillance. You cannot have this kind of power over others without something being lost. And what's being lost is the sovereignty of what it means to be an individual. You talked about people. I have nothing to hide. We've been hearing this meme.
Sure.
I don't care if the government sees my emails. I don't care if if they're listening in on my phone calls. Justin Rayek and I co-taught a couple of classes at the invitation of a professor at Johns Hopkins the last couple of days, and in both of these classes, one was 200 students, adult learners. The other one was about 50. I've been doing this now for quite a while, and every time I run this privacy exercise, and I'm going to share it with your audience, no one has said yes, except one person recently in California said maybe. And I would like to share the privacy exercise with your audience, because it takes on this idea that if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to worry about.
Right,
which, by the way, actually is a version of a statement attributed to, guess who? Goebbels, from the Nazi regime, in the 20th century. And so I would like to run this exercise for your audience, and indulge your audience for a bit. So what I ask your audience to do is take all of your passwords, all of your accounts, your email passwords, your bank passwords, your health records, your phone bill, everything there is to know about you. Stick it in the keys to your car, by the way, toss those in as well, and also to your house and apartment. Put them in a box, drive across town, knock on the door of a perfect stranger who happens to be a fellow American citizen, and when they answer the door, you present them the box and say, here, I'm giving this to you for safekeeping. Would you do it? Would you do it?
There's no way.
Every person has said, no, of course not. And then there's this pause, and I simply say, why not? Because I don't trust them. Because I'm an individual. I don't know what they'll do with the information. Then I say, well, wait a minute. Or some version of that, right? And I say, wait a minute. This is a fellow American citizen. You're a consenting adult. You're willing to give your life for safekeeping to a fellow American, a fellow citizen, not a foreign citizen, not a spy, not some terrorist, a fellow citizen.
I like this is ideal, though, because in your scenario, we have a choice. They're just...
Well, yes, I have a choice. I have a choice because I'm a sovereign individual, and you're saying you will not give that life, your private life, to a fellow American citizen, and it's in a lockbox. It's your box of your own making, and you're giving it to them. You say you won't. I say you don't trust them. Look, Wait a minute, it's a fellow American citizen. If you're not willing to give that to a fellow American citizen with your consent, willingly, why the heck would you allow the government unfettered access to everything, of virtually everything there is to know about you, without your consent?
Right. Amen.
There's a pause. Right there. And they say, ooh, maybe there is, because if you don't trust your own fellow citizen face to face, how in the heck can you trust the government?
No.
Accessing everything there is to know. Look, that's precisely, I've lived this. I don't want any other American citizen or any citizen in any other country knowing there are countries in which that is the case. I never imagined it would be the case in my own country, because that's what they did to me. They took the equivalent of electron microscope and found everything they could that there was to find out about me. All my tax records, all my phone calls. I mean, it was extraordinary, extraordinary. Profiled 50 Ways of Sunday. An attempt to understand why I'd gone bad, why I'd become the Benedict Arnold, to make an object lesson of me.
Well, that's
doctoring evidence.
Man. I mean, the people, they stand by and they say, well, I don't care if they take the phone calls and if they tap in until it becomes, Judgment Day, when the decision is made that you're, say, of dissent, or you said this or that. It's too much power.
But we've had to see. We so easily forget. Remember, it is we the people. Last time I checked, the preamble still says we the people, the Constitution, in order to form a more perfect union. We're going backwards. What the heck was the Magna Carta all about? This thing about the divine right of kings and everybody's a subject to the king. We are citizens with sovereign rights. We're not subjects of the state. We're not wards of the state. We're not subject to the state.
Well, we're fighting back, but it seems like they have an immunity that is unpenetrable. It seems unwavering. It seems sometimes, and I don't want to be too pessimistic or negative about it, but the more that we fight, the more that I sit here, talking into this microphone, the more secretive it becomes. More secret. Councils, little judges and juries becoming more secretive. The power becomes more, Yeah,
the secret cabals. Remember, one of the things I've said, and it's been in some circles controversial when I say this. After 9/11, I've said this publicly, I will continue to state it. The government unchained itself from the Constitution. It unbound itself from the rule of law. It gave itself license to do whatever it could do. If you've ever read Catch-22 in the Joseph Heller novel, the Colonel Cathcart defense, who's going to stop us now? We have all this power. Who's going to stop us? Jane Mayer, in a seminal article that was written in the New Yorker, it's the most comprehensive summary, long-form summary by one of the nation's leading investigative journalists, an extraordinary journalist in her own right. She wrote this article. It was published in May of 2011. A lot of people rediscovering it or hearing about it for the first time as a result of its Snowden disclosures, knowing that people like myself and others had been blowing the whistle on this going back a long time. In that article, toward the end, she summarizes the account of Diane Rourke, who I also was the House Permanent Select Committee staffer who actually had the NSA account for 5 years between 1997 and 2002. Retired in April, was part of a group that was offering up counsel and advice, kind of an advisory group at large to the intelligence apparatus. She confronts General Michael V. Hayden, who's central to my story, by the way, and confronts him directly, face to face, and says, after all is said and done, knowing you're in violation of the Fourth Amendment and FISA, why did you do it? Why did you embark on this after 9/11? Why? Four-word answer, incredibly chilling. We had the power. When it comes to a point when the government in secret asserts unconstitutional power. Power is never given to it. When it grants itself license to violate the very Constitution, it itself has taken an oath. So when you have our own government becomes a criminal enterprise. When our own government says, you know what, everybody's suspicious. We're all foreigners now, which I've said, literally turning the United States of America into the equivalent of a foreign nation for the purpose of dragnet, blanket, electronic surveillance on a scale that far exceeds any other nation in all nations in history. I mean, this even makes East Germany, in terms of its ability to surveil the population, look like pikers, and that was a fascist surveillance state with a fence around it to keep people in. We now have the equivalent of that in this country. A digital fence already surrounds us. The government knows far more about what we do each and every day. Look, Snowden, the Dash 80 order, the secret court, by the way, a secret court that was actually a compromise solution signed into law by President Carter in 1978, a compromise solution where you have a secret court housed in the Department of Justice, judges appointed by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. All its function was, if an affidavit, probable cause affidavit, was put before it because of a U.S. person, American citizen, resident legal alien, U.S. corporation, engaged in foreign intelligence to damage the United States of America, all they did was say yes or no to the warrant. That's all their job was. It was never designed to be a court of rendering secret opinion. It was never designed to be an enabling mechanism. I've asked that it be abolished. You cannot have a secret court with secret opinions and secret evidence. That's what has happened. And remember, after 9/11, they bypassed it.
We got a secret club up here.
Well,
secret. We got a secret. We got our own court.
Well, guess what has to give? When the government embarks on this, they obviously are hiding from the public. They're hiding from their own citizens. When you start turning on your own citizens and you simply dismiss the idea that any citizen has rights or sovereignty, aren't we going backwards to the period, literally, at least virtually now, in terms of the implications?
What about the NSA spying on U.S. government officials?
Wow.
What about and then sending that information to Israel? How about those sort of things?
Yeah, I've heard that. I know people who say they saw evidence. I can't vouch for that or confirm it. But look, I'll give you one example, which I said publicly and in certain more recent panels. Remember where the AP scandal hit? The AP wiretapping scandal, where the NSA was monitoring, it turns out, many, many phone numbers for the Associated Press journalists, reporters. And they claimed that they made a mistake, and they entered in during all these revelations that instead of 202, they entered in, instead of 20, which is the international code, the digraph for Egypt, they put in 202, the area code, one of the primary area codes for Washington, D.C. You think that was just a little mistake? Oh, just adding a 2? Look, that's no mistake. If you have access to the 202 area code, guess what you also have access to?
Yeah.
All the government offices that exist in D.C., including senators and congressmen. Because even in the AP, the Associated Press revelations, it was phone number. They're getting phone calls. They're being made by reporters to people in Congress. And as we know from the Dash 80 order, one of the first major revelations from the Snowden disclosures, each and every day, Verizon was under orders to turn over all of its phone records to NSA each and every day. And don't tell me that they didn't turn over names. They don't tell me they weren't turning over location information, because that's precisely what's in the order. Now, why would they need every single phone number turned over to NSA each and every day, which in itself is a fundamental violation of the Fourth Amendment? Because there is no probable cause. What's this blanket order? Okay, so if the general warrant, that's a violation of the Constitution. One reason we have a Fourth Amendment, because that's what the British Crown and King George was issuing with the colonists, was these general warrants, writs of assistance. You just show up at your house, and I could take away you as a person. I could come to your place without you had no protections at all, and I could go through all your effects.
Right.
I could haul you away. I could haul your effects away. So the Fourth Amendment is so extraordinarily important to the sovereignty of an individual in this country.
Russ Tice said he saw specific orders to spy on then-Senator Barack Obama, Senator John McCain, Colin Powell, Petraeus, a Supreme Court justice. I mean, if they're spying on these people, like he says, and we are, according to Snowden documents, we're sharing, the NSA is sharing raw data with Israel.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they didn't get much press. It's interesting because they're not second party. They're not part of the Five Eyes. And obviously we made exceptions, and apparently, and the government has backpedaled on that or attempted to cover it. It never got much press. I find that quite interesting that you would be giving raw intelligence. I mean, I find it doubly ironic because I remember in executive session with General Hayden, where there was getting all these demands, as he put it, these demands coming from other parts of the intelligence community, an oxymoron in itself, intelligence community, requesting raw data. And they actually had an ongoing discussion at the higher levels of NSA about how far up the stream, and he always used these analogies, but how far up stream would you give access to the CIA, the data the NSA had, as if NSA owned this data. Because that's how they viewed it. We own it, and we don't know what you're going to do with it, so we'll tell you what it says, but we're not going to actually provide it to you. Yet here is clearly a case where we were turning over extraordinary amounts of raw information. Mm. Now, I understand there are secret agreements and arrangements. I understand all that. The red line for me, and I recognize spying has gone on for millennia. I get that. Some call it the world's second oldest profession, okay? I understand all that. Remember, I was part of that system in terms of, quote-unquote, keeping track of what was going on in the world. But it's a whole other thing when you actually wire and penetrate the very heart and fabric of your society, your own country, with surveillance gear and equipment, or through special agreements with companies like Verizon, where you just turn, or under the cover of an order, turning over all this. No wonder the telecoms have to get immunity, because they would have been completely exposed. There's no opt-in when you're a Verizon customer, or by the way, yes, AT&T, or yes, Sprint, and any number of others. There's no opt-in thing that says, oh yes, I grant license to or it's buried in some of the fine print, right? Because you're a subscriber, and so somehow it's like, hey, we just turn it over. They're not turning. By the way, they're not turning this over to the government for free. If you look at Verizon itself, billions and billions over several years have been spent by the government paying for this. These companies don't give data to the government for free. So what are they doing with it? See, here's the question. What are they doing with the data? I'll argue that it's a violation of the Constitution, the Fourth Amendment, if you're a U.S. citizen, for them to even collect the metadata without cause, without probable cause, reasonable suspicion, or even under the Patriot Act. Even under the Patriot Act, it had a relevancy standard when it was modified in 2006. This goes far beyond that. It's just unfettered access.
This goes back to this is an overall trend that we've talked about on the show with DNA swabs when people get pulled over and these sort of things. And it is this kind of general movement towards cataloging every person.
Well,
okay, so it's not this kind of grand devious thing. It's a catalog.
Yeah.
And the thing is that the catalog is looking pretty good on their end. They got a pretty good catalog because, as you said, they can go after pretty much anybody. They can get information from, anybody. It's becoming very, very almost impossible to hide. So actually, cataloging is
they know that. See, but see, this is the thing. This is extraordinary power and the temptation to collect even more.
Well, it gives you
The
it's just more control. It's more power. In case anything may happen, we got your name. We got your number. You know what? You don't have to call us. We'll call you. Because we're cataloging everything on you.
Yeah, but see, if you catalog and index essentially everybody, you have the ability to essentially at the click of a mouse, the press of a button, to generate a profile on you in an instant at any time. Please provide me from the databases everything there is to know about this person. Look, they did that with me. I saw that myself when they came to my house, but they had already done extraordinary electronic surveillance, accessing all of my records and then some. Because this is the real danger. The danger is when you have that, they can come after you, they can keep track of you, they can monitor you, and what happens, people adjust their behavior. I mean, it's already true. I talked to reporters and journalists, one of the silver linings in my case, because I was able to keep my freedoms and hold them off. I did not end up in prison. I didn't pay any fines. One of the things that is clear in talking to reporters, in many cases some that are part of mainstream media, they're already seeing the extraordinary effect on their ability to report what's going on inside the secret side of government. Even long-term sources, deep sources that are so far in background you never even hear about them, you never even made reference to them in articles, are increasingly afraid to speak with even mainstream reporters so it's already having. And so, wow, then you end up censoring yourself. You end up not reporting or saying anything because of what might happen. Is that the country we want to keep?
And they're going after people.
What?
Yeah, Michael Hastings.
I mean, they have people like Michael Hastings. I mean, I don't know. People are afraid.
How does your engine fly?
Well, afraid. I mean, you say.
Yeah, right.
I mean, that's not. I grew up in Texas and Vermont. They were republics before they became states. I wasn't brought up to fear my own government. If you become subject to the state or virtual subject of a state because you're afraid of what the government might do to you, what kind of country are we living in? I mean, remember, we had in our own history the incredible abuse of instruments of national power. Think about the Nixon administration. In fact, some people are now going back to an era in which I was a very young adult. I couldn't imagine. I mean, no one was above the law, not even the president. Even when the president said it was legal, it wasn't legal.
It makes me think about FDR. I'm reading this book now about FDR, and he used to sick journalists on people. That's what he would do. He actually used the journalists. He'd go, "Hey, could you check out this thing for me?"
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They were working for him, And there was more of this thing, but now
they're literally working for Obama now.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Well, he's a secrecy president. I keep telling people he's a total hypocrite. You've got people for all of the eloquence and all of the these broad stroke pronouncements about a new era, right? It was going to be the most open and transparent administration in U.S. political history, our own government history. For all that, he took the silver platter of surveillance and secrecy was handed to him by Bush and has just run with it. I mean, just run with it. And there's still a lot more to come. I mean, he's embraced this with a passion and a fury that just is extraordinary. He loves this stuff. He eats it up. There's a telling picture published some time ago with James Clapper, the head of National Intelligence, the director of National Intelligence, and you see him holding up. You can't see what's on it. It's clearly classified. And you've got the president just like looking at it like, wow, these are the secrets I get to see each and every day. They're just eating it up. Mm. When you have a president that embraces secrecy like that, who enjoys using it to find out about others, and obviously, get this, you tell me he didn't know about Angela Merkel's cell phone being monitored by NSA?
Of course he knew.
Yeah, there's no way. I mean, I know from the inside, when you had access to intelligence about leaders, that was some of the most sensitive stuff, and that was the stuff that went to the tippy-top levels of government, up to and including the president. But why would we see? People ask me, well, that's what we're supposed to do, right? We're supposed to, but wait a minute. Germany, I mean, is supposed to be one of our primary partners. I mean, I recognize there are real threats to international stability and order. Why would you have to spy on Angela Merkel, who, by the way, grew up in East Germany before the wall came down? Why? It gives a whole new meaning to certain statements that were made by Obama back in the summer, where he says, well, if I need to find out Angela Merkel's thinking, I pick up the phone and call her. He didn't have to pick up the phone and call her. I mean, I've said we had a secret coup d'etat in this country after 9/11. I wish people would get it. The Constitution essentially has become null and void. It really has.
Thomas Drake, your words ring true on this show, and I want to thank you so much for talking to us.
There's more whistleblowers to come, according to Jesselyn Radack. There's two more NSA whistleblowers that are coming forward. Is that correct, Thomas?
Well, I'm not sure about numbers, but there clearly have been a lot more people, as she has said publicly, coming Government Accountability Project's way, and as well as other organizations that are advocates and supporters for whistleblowers in light of the Snowden revelations. I know Snowden was standing on my shoulders and others, and I believe that Snowden's revelations alone will encourage others to also realize what's at stake and to reveal in the public interest what else is going on inside of our government. It's anathema to who we are as human beings. You cannot have a secret government with this kind of power coexisting with what is supposed to be a democracy in the form of a constitutional republic. And that's why I've said I fear for the republic. It is we the people in order to form a more perfect union. If we don't care about this, if we don't actually take action to resist it and to roll it back, I've asked just to get back to 9/10 of 2001. Repeal all of this enabling. It reminds me of the Weimar Republic. That's what it reminds me of. In the 1930s, in Article 48, it's extraordinarily chilling for me. The history's not kind here. It really isn't. And when you have governments that have this much power, they ultimately abuse it. And when they abuse it, in the end, they turn it on their own. Everybody becomes suspicious. And we're all subject to the state. And I don't want to live in that kind of society. I just don't. The sovereignty of the individual is inviolate. We do have inalienable rights. And that's why I've dedicated the rest of my life to the defense of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Amen. Thomas Drake, your words ring true, and it's an honor to have you on the show. We support you. You are a hero, and, onward and upward. We're trying to get the word out to people.
Keep getting the word out.
I mean, obviously we talk about it a lot. I don't want to harp on it, but we live in an illusion society. People need to wake up, and they need to understand that these sort of things are happening, because it is fascinating how little people do know about all of these things and why they should even care at all. Yeah. So we got ourselves an uphill battle. Now, that being said, I feel good about where we are. I feel good about what you're doing. And you just keep doing your thing. Thomas Drake, NSA whistleblower on the Black Tower Show. Honor to have you on the show. And we're going to have you on the show again if you'd like to.
Sure. I'd be glad to come back on your show. I appreciate the invitation. I know it was kind of long in the making.
No, this has been great. You take care. You have a good night, and we'll talk to you soon.